네, 안녕하십니까.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining the Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity 2022. We would like to begin the Global Korean Public Diplomacy for Peace and Coexistence session. For the smooth operation of the event, please kindly put your cell phone on vibrate. The session is being simultaneously translated. For the on-site participants, please use interpretation receiver device placed on your table for the interpretation services, and you can use channel number 1 for Korean and channel number 2 for English. Once again, I would like to thank all the participants, and I am Lee Joo-hee and I am the MC for today. Thank you. Today, in the world, we see a lot of elements which can cause tension, and to solve these conflicts, the importance of public diplomacy as a soft power is getting recognized. In this session, we would like to take a look at the public diplomacy of overseas Koreans and seek its direction and the role for peace and coexistence of the international community. With that, I'd like to introduce today's speakers for this session. The first speaker is President Kim Sung-gon of Overseas Koreans Foundation. President Kim was inaugurated as the president of Overseas Koreans Foundation in November 2020 and served as the member of the 15th, 17th, 18th, and 19th National Assembly. Second speaker is actor So-hee Park. Mr. Park is a Korean resident in Japan who's now active in his career in the US. He recently featured in Apple TV's Pachinko series and played the role of Mosasu. The last speaker is Ms. Yumi Hogan, the First Lady of the State of Maryland. She is the first Asian First Lady in the history of the state and is currently very active in the field of public diplomacy. And we have another discussant, Ambassador for Public Diplomacy Lee Sang-hwa. After joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1991, Ambassador Lee has served as an assistant to the United Nations Secretary General, head of the North Korean Nuclear Affairs Bureau, and ambassador to Myanmar. With that, we would like to invite President Kim Sung-gon of Overseas Koreans Foundation and listen to the presentation titled Public Diplomacy with Overseas Koreans, Beautiful Korean Campaign. Please welcome President Kim for the beginning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As was just introduced, I am the president of Overseas Korean Foundation, and my name is Kim Sung-gon. And this session entitled Public Diplomacy of Global Koreans, hosted by our foundation. Welcome to the session, and I would like to welcome Secretary General of Korean National Commission for UNESCO, Mr. Han Kyung-gu, and Yumi Hogan, the First Lady of the State of the Maryland, and actress So-hee Park of Pachinko, and Ambassador and Deputy Minister for Public Diplomacy, Mr. Lee Sang-hwa. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Well, people call us Korean. So I wonder if you've thought about the meaning of Korean. Well, it was 1,100 years ago when the country called Korea was founded. And Korea, well, in Korean it's Korea, but in English it's Korea. But if you look at the name in the Chinese character, it means highly beautiful. So it's a Korean means highly beautiful. So Korean should mean highly beautiful people. And that is why I have named the public diplomacy conducted by for overseas Koreans as beautiful Korean diplomacy. I don't know if you've seen this before. According to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, public diplomacy is defined as as it says that it's something that's through direct communication with foreign citizens, a consensus on the history of tradition, culture, art, values, policies, and the visions of Korea, and or secure trust, and thereby enhancing diplomatic relations of Korea. That's what public diplomacy means. And so we work 365 days with citizens of other countries in order to enhance the images of Korea. And as you know, there are 7.5 million Koreans in over 180 countries. And these overseas Koreans are familiar with both the languages of Korea as well as the languages of the countries that they live in. And they are the best public diplomats in that they know the languages, but they also know the culture, and they reside in those countries. And the history of public diplomacy has a history of 150 years. And the first immigration to Russia began about 110 years ago. And Koreans also went to Hawaii to work on the plantation, the sugar plantation. And during the Japanese colonial war, well, there were quite a large number of Koreans who were conscripted made into they were forced into labor. There are about 600,000 Koreans living in Japanese like that. And there were also nurses that went to Germany to work, as well as the miners. So they all have settled in those countries, and they have become the overseas Koreans working as, I believe, the public diplomats. And we do have very proud Koreans. We have Mr. Baek Ji-noon, who is the member of the House of the Consular in Japan, and we have Masayoshi, the founder of Japanese company, the SoftBank, and we have Ambassador Sung Kim, as well as President Young Kim of the World Bank, and the James Che, the former Australian ambassador to Korea, and Jessica Porpier, the member of the European Parliament. And there were also four Korean descendants who have been elected to the House of Representatives in the United States. There are so many Koreans that are working to promote, I believe, public diplomacy. And according to Article 3 of the Public Diplomacy Law of Korea, or public diplomacy, it says, should be promoted by reflecting the universal values of the humanity as well as the unique characteristics of Korea. And Korea's public diplomacy should be based on what's called 홍익인간, the founding principle of Korea. We say that we are the children of Dangun. 4,500 years ago, Dangun is founded Korea's first country. That is the first country on the Korean peninsula, called the Gojoseon, and made 홍익인간 the basic principle. And 홍익인간, as you means, is to benefit the human world. That is, we are to give benefits not just to Koreans but everybody in the world. And this is very much in line with the global citizenship that is promoted by the United Nations. As we have experienced during the pandemic, no country or no ethnic group can live alone. Everybody has to help each other. We have to work together to benefit each other. And so for overseas Koreans, they have to contribute not just to the community of the Koreans in those countries, but they also have to contribute to the development and the betterment of the people that live with them. And they also have to work to make sure that the minorities' rights are protected, and also to ensure that the minorities and the majority of the population live together happily. And that is what it means to promote or to realize the spirit of 홍익인간. But there's a saying here in Korea, if when in Rome, do as Romans do. And so you have to follow the customs and the laws of the countries that you live in. But at the same time, you have to make sure that, according to Hong Ye-Gingan, that you have to become like vitamins of that community. As you know, vitamins in very small dosage, but they are essential nutrients for our bodies. So we may have different skin colors, languages, and different religions, but as members of the community, we have to make sure that we do promote for the betterment of the communities that we live in, and that's what we should do. And we also have to make sure that we realize the spirits of Taegeuk. And I'm so proud of our flag, national flag, Taegeuk. At the center, we have Taegeuk, and at the four edges, we have what's called the sky, the fire, the water, and the land. And this is, of course, is based on an old book here in Asia, and we call this yin and yang of thoughts. And yin and yang and philosophy, as you know, is the view of the universe that is has been accepted by the people here in Northeast Asia. That means that people in China, Korea, and Japan. And so plus minus of the night and day, or fire and water, everything is in pair. So yin and yang they are very dynamic, but at the same time they should be in balance, and they should be there for the coexistence. If the balance is broken, and if there is a clash between yin and yang, then the health of a person would be deteriorate, and also the peace would break. And I think this is a concept that can be applied to inter-Korean relations as well. For we have lived as one people for 1300 years, but because of the invasion of the powers around us, we had to be divided back into North and South, with North being occupied by Soviet Union and South being supported or occupied by the United States. And we also had to go through a civil war back in 1950s, and for 70 years we did not have any exchanges. We only had military clashes, in fact. And this is not an example of being beautiful Koreans. As you know, the Jewish, they were lived in diaspora, but now they were able to build a country where all the Jewish people could come together and live together. And we have not been able to do that, and this is something that we should always be sorry about. And so all the overseas Koreans should also should all work together to ensure that there is reunification on the Korean Peninsula, and we should also promote for the exchanges among North and South Korea. And you should and overseas Koreans also should work to make sure that there is a peace on the peninsula. And I believe that we should all work together so that we can have reunification on the Korean Peninsula. And we should also have friendly relations with all the neighboring countries around us. We may be small in terms of landmass, and we may have smaller population than our neighboring countries, but I do believe that Korea can definitely play a role in bringing about peace here in Northeast Asia. And the peaceful reunification of Korea does not just mean peace on the Korean Peninsula. I believe that the peaceful reunification of the Koreans would also bring about reconciliation and harmony among all the clashing powers around the world. There's a saying in Korea: the people who have been sick would know the way to treat or to cure that particular disease. Koreans have gone through so many wars in their history, but however, we should be able to forgive. And I believe that the goal of our diplomacy should be to ensure that there is peace, not just here on the peninsula, but everywhere. And we have to make sure that there's no discrimination, that we have to make sure that we can all be prosperous without discriminating anybody else, or not without leaving anybody behind. And global Koreans, I believe, should also work through of cultural activities. So the Korean language, the Korean characters, that is, and and we have our culture in terms of content as well as food. And as you know, Korean pop culture as well as other culture are receiving a lot of attention. We talk about K-food, K-beauty, we talk about Taekwondo. I hope that you will actively promote this beautiful Korean culture in the countries that you live in. But I hope that you will learn about the cultures of the communities that you live in. So that because this has to be a two-way diplomacy, and our foundation actually is hosting so-called kimchi festival with our overseas Koreans, and so with hope that you will have hold food festivals in your own countries if you are not doing so already. We have Yumi Hogan with us, the First Lady of the state of Maryland. I read a book. It says that among the so it's Mrs. Hogan's house is the only house among the 51 governors mentioned that has kimchi refrigerators. I understand that she does promote kimchi, and also the governor, His Excellency Governor Hogan, is also very proficient in Taekwondo. And I believe that Honorable Yumi Hogan is the one of the leading beautiful Korean public diplomats. So let's give a round of applause to Yumi Hogan for all that she has done for the promotion of public diplomacy. Well, people around the world around us call us Koreans, and I said that Koreans mean beautiful people, and that means that we do have to live up to the name of beautiful Koreans.
You should live up to your name. Let's make this world beautiful. 이제 모든 아름다운 코리안이 되어서
So we should all be beautiful Koreans and should all work together to make a beautiful world. Thank you.
네, 김상곤이
Thank you. Thank you, President Kim, for sending out this hopeful message. Just like you said, along with the Koreans both in Korea and overseas that we take deep pride in, I hope that we can make a massive contribution to the development of the international community. And the next presentation would be delivered by Mr. Park So-hee under the topic of Me and My Zainichi story. Please welcome him with a big hand.
여러분
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is So-hee Park. I was born and raised in Japan, so I'm third generation Korean Japanese. So my Korean is not so good. I will now be speaking in English.
I'm an actor, and I was born and grew up in Japan as the third generation Korean. And here, I'm very happy to share with you all my me and my Zainichi story. So this is a bridge. As I grew up in Japan as Zainichi, I was told many things by my parents. Like, So-hee, you have to think of yourself as an ambassador of Korea. If you do good in Japan, Japanese people think Korea is good. If you do bad, Japanese people think Korea is bad. you have to be number one for anything among your Japanese kid in school, anything. Studying, sports, or even fighting, a big pressure, right? And finally, we, Zainichi, can be the bridge between Japan and Korea. My parents kept saying that again and again. So, which do you all think I am? I'm Japanese or Korean? Well, I was born in Japan, and I speak Japanese. My native language is Japanese. I went to Japanese school with all Japanese kids. So I'm Japanese. Or I used to have Korean nationality. Many of Zainichi people still have Korean nationality, Korean passport. And my name is Sohee Park. I kept my Korean name. And then every time I watch soccer game or baseball game, I of course root for Korean team. I still watch 2002 World Cup video when An Jong-fan 선수가 golden goal scored 했을 때, you know, every time I need to encourage myself, I still watch the video. So I'm Korean. But I think of myself as Zainichi. I am Zainichi. So what is Zainichi? What does Zainichi literally mean? Zainichi, Zai means to be, to stay, or to exist. And Nichi means Japan. So Zainichi means to be in Japan. So if you're an American living in Japan, you are Zainichi American. If you're Russian in Japan, you are Zainichi Russian. But we Zainichi people took the word Zainichi very closer to our identity. So we call ourselves Zainichi. And this is not a math. I'm not good at math at all in school and right now too. So it's not logical. These equations are. It's not logical. But emotionally, to me, it's very correct. Zainichi not equal Japanese. But Zainichi nearly equal Korean. You know, we are in Japan. Japanese people think of us, you're Korean, you're foreigner. But every time, like I come to Korea, even my Korean friends, my best friends, they say, hey Sohee, you're Japanese, right? No. So we are like in the middle. We can't, so Zainichi is Zainichi. That's my identity. So this is a photo from Pachinko. I heard it is very popular in Korea and globally. If you watch this drama, you'll understand more about Zainichi history and stuff. So I recommend you all to watch this drama. Thank you. And this opening title sequence people love, I heard, because it's very fun. The drama itself is very kind of sad. People cry a lot. But this opening, you know, people dancing, fun, laughing. So our Zainichi is not only a sad history. We're living, surviving, we laugh a lot, energetic. And many of us are very charismatic. We enjoy our lives too. Zainichi and language. The very first Korean word I learned is, what do you all think? It's aigo. Why? My first generation grandmother always said, aigo. Every time like my parents started to argue on trivial things, my grandmother says, 아이고, 뭐 아들 앞에서 아이고야. That's how I learned 아이고. But that's it. When I was younger, I didn't speak Korean at all. Even my first generation grandmother never spoke Korean in Japan. And of course, the second generation, my parents, they didn't speak Korean. They didn't learn. They didn't have chance to learn Korean. But my generation, third generation, we feel more freer, or we want to learn Korean. So I came to Korea when I was 28 years old for 6 months to study Korean. I'm talking about our name. My name is Sohee Park. And I also have a name, like this Japanese style name, Soji Arai. Many of Zainichi people have two names because the first generation name was taken by the Imperial Japan. The second generation, the name was taken their own first generation parents because the first generation parents were worried about the second generation children's life. They don't want them to be discriminated. And finally, the third generation and the younger, we could embrace our Korean name too. So like some of my friends made like a declaration of being a Korean. As soon as they enter the university or high school, starting a new life, they just say to their Japanese friends, okay, I didn't say this, but actually I'm Korean. My name is Park Sohee or Kim Ra, you know. Yes. So these are the typical profession of Zainichi people. Because first generation and second generation, there was a tough discrimination. They couldn't work for the big Japanese corporations, so they started to, you know, work for their own business. They were all entrepreneurs. Pachinko parlor, like me in the character of Pachinko, Korean Japanese restaurant, Korean barbecue restaurants, and singer, actor, baseball players, and 변호사, lawyers, and also sometimes we had to protect each other. So some kind of godfather figures we have too. So these professions, like 이사장님 그 소개해 주신 것처럼 we have prominent, very successful businessmen and influential actors and singers, very celebrities. But are they contributing or supporting Zainichi community? What do you think? I'm sorry to say this, but not much. They can't do much. Because there are still racism in Japan, discrimination towards Korean. Not like former days. 옛날에는 차별은
So long time ago, the discrimination was far worse.
even more extremely, like hate speech, hate demonstration. People are screaming at, all Koreans go home, all Koreans are criminals. Or the other way is on the internet, very shady racism is still going on. So, still our 선배들, senior Zainichi celebrities or influential people are still afraid. They can't do much. I understand. Like a couple of months ago, the former minister of Japan got assassinated, right? As soon as I heard that news, what do you think I thought? I thought, please, assassin, criminal is not Zainichi. I asked many of my Chinese friends, and they said the same thing. They were worried, the same thing. Meanwhile, K-pop, K-drama, K-movies, K-cosmetics are so popular in Japan. If you go to Shin-Okubo or Tsuruhashi, which are Korea towns in Japan, there are more people, much more people than the people in Tokyo Disneyland. That's what I heard. So popular Korean culture. But the bridge gets smaller. Why? I'm feeling like, where are us? Where is Zainichi? Are we disappearing? Because Japanese people like Korean culture. Korean people like Japanese culture. People are doing okay. People don't need the bridge anymore. What is the meaning of us, Zainichi's existence? Sometimes I feel like Zainichi is in history. A country called Imperial Japan raped our motherland, and then child was born. That bastard is Zainichi. So Zainichi is even ignored by their own mother. We have that kind of trauma. We always have like one-sided love toward Korea. So I will. Even if my senior Zainichi 선배들 can't say anything, even if they have to be silent, I want to talk about Zainichi. I will keep speaking about Zainichi. I want much more people to know about us, about existence, about Zainichi people. So to me, Zainichi is, I'm an actor, so I'm a little bit poetic. To me, Zainichi is, this is my grandmother, maternal grandmother. She came from Korea while she was 15 years old, and me, 1 month old. To me, Zainichi, to me, Korea is the memory of her. To me, Zainichi is her, the memory of her speaking Japanese with very thick Korean accent. To me, Zainichi is my hamme. So this is the last photo of my presentation. I wore these badges, Japan and Korea. I will keep being loud about our Zainichi history and our existence of Japanese. And Korea, we were born between these countries, and then yes, I am Zainichi. Thank you for listening.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Actor Park So-hee shared his candid thoughts and stories with us, living as a Zainichi. He had a lot of experiences and sorrows living in Japan. Thank you for sharing your story. I hope that you can continue to serve as a bridge linking Korea and Japan. With that, let us invite our third speaker today. We have Ms. Yumi Hogan, the First Lady of the State of Maryland. She would like to talk about the global Korean public diplomacy for peace and coexistence. Please welcome her with a big hand.
안녕하세요.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before me, President Kim Sung-gun has shared his presentation. I studied a lot thanks to your presentation. I didn't know that Korea, the word Korea, means beautiful. So I would like to take pride in this beautiful Korean concept that Jeju taught me. And also, Mr. Park So-hee has given a big speech.
저희 우리 딸들이 이세구, 그다음 우리 손자.
My daughter and my granddaughter is the same third generation as Mr. Park, so I would like to thank him. Before I begin, I would like to thank President Kim Sung-gun of Overseas Koreans Foundation and all the staff members for organizing this meaningful session. It is an honor to attend this 17th Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity and meet all of you. Also, I would like to thank, I don't know if he's here, but I would like to thank Ambassador Im Soo-seok from Greece for inviting me. And also I would like to thank all the staff members who have worked hard to prepare for the session. Also, we are joined by my beloved husband, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, who takes great pride in being a Korean son-in-law. There is one thing I have to thank you all. In 2015, I was diagnosed with a stage 3, almost stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of blood cancer. But thanks to your prayers and support, by November, around Thanksgiving, it will have been 7 years since the full recovery. I thank you all. In 2015, my husband and I visited Korea as the first destination of our first Asian tour. And in 2017, I visited Korea leading an economic diplomacy delegation. And my husband and I, for the third time, are now visiting Korea. To finish strong, I decided to visit my home country once again. I moved to the United States more than 43 years ago, but I have never forgotten my home country, Korea. Who are we and where did we come from? It is very important to know our roots and keep our identity. In particular, we have to make sure that we educate the second and third generation of Korean Americans and to pass on the culture. This is our responsibility. Including myself, I believe 7.5 million overseas Koreans in all corners of the world will sympathize with me on this. To make sure that our next generation can be proud, we first-generation immigrants must teach and lead. I'm a daughter from Korea. I was born and raised as the youngest of 8 children in a poultry farm in Jeju, Jeollanam-do province, and I immigrated to the United States in the late 1970s. I had to adapt to a new, unfamiliar culture. I had to learn English and new culture and overcome many difficulties. Overcoming countless trials and tribulations in America, where I immigrated with the American dream, I never abandoned hope nor gave up. I always tried to live my life to the fullest. As the first Asian American First Lady in Maryland's history and the first Korean American First Lady in American history, for the last 8 years or so, I indeed felt a heavy responsibility. While serving as the First Lady of Maryland, as a Korean American, I did not forget promoting Korea. As the Korean proverb goes, arms bend inward. I didn't forget promoting Korea because I know I am from Korea. As the first generation of Korean immigrants, I felt a great sense of responsibility and a strong sense of mission. The Maryland state residence is the second largest in the United States after that of Illinois. Located in Annapolis, the capital of Maryland, the official residence has a history of more than 150 years. It's where my husband and I live during our term as governor, and it's more of a museum than a comfortable home, actually. There are 3 chefs, 7 staff members, and 32 bodyguards in the residence. The whole environment was quite new, and it took me quite a long time to get used to the surroundings. I didn't want to become the first lady who ruled from the above. I respected each and every one of them and tried to communicate with sincerity. I rolled up my sleeves and washed the dishes and cooked myself. And actually, the chef who has served several governors' families for over 34 years was amazed and said that he was thankful to work with me. In Korea, we share our love by sharing food. I cooked Korean food and shared with dozens of staff members in the residence and the governor's office and bodyguards. As I cooked bulgogi, japchae, and kimchi and many other Korean dishes, Marylanders got more and more interested in Korean foods. And if you search Yumik Cooks on YouTube, you can actually see a series of my cooking videos featuring my Korean recipe. It might seem a little bit clumsy or poor when you see it from here in Korea, but for me, it was the small step, or it was the idea to introduce Korean culture to our next generation and young people of our ethnicities. We also made a lot of efforts to promote Korean culture and to further promote Korea's proud Taekwondo, which has now become a globally recognized official Olympic sport event. My husband and I designated April 5th as the Taekwondo Day in Maryland. April 5th is the Arbor Day in Korea, and we wanted to help Taekwondo take root just like we plant trees, and every year we host a commemorative event. And I wear hanbok several times a year. My husband and I at the Maryland State Capitol proclaimed January 13th, which is the day that the Korean immigrants set foot in Hawaii for the first time in 1903, as Korean American Day every year. And when New Year comes around, I have one more chance to celebrate this Korean American Day wearing hanbok. And we also commemorate the Lunar New Year's Day every year. At the state residence, we invite about 200 Asian community leaders who celebrate Lunar New Year's Day, which of course include Koreans, and host a reception. We mainly serve Korean foods, including kimchi I made myself, and celebrate New Year's Day. And I of course wear hanbok on that occasion as well. There are Korean Way and Koreatown in Maryland. Ellicott City, Howard County, Maryland is where a lot of Koreans live. We designated Korean Way in 2016 on the Route 40 of Ellicott City, and last year a Korean town sculpture with traditional Korean tiles, giwa, was built. The purpose was to recognize and publicize the important contribution of the Korean American community in enriching racial and cultural diversity, and to help revitalize local tourism and businesses, including the Korean Business District. While working as a First Lady, I come to have a lot of meaningful memories, but one of the most memorable one would be the February 8th, 2020. The National Governors Association winter meeting is held every winter in Washington, D.C., the capital city of the United States, bringing governors from each state to the heart of the country. In 2020, my husband chaired the National Association of Governors, and he could decide where to hold the reception. And my husband and I didn't miss the opportunity and chose the residence of the Korean ambassador to the United States. The ambassador and his wife wore hanbok and greeted the guests. And also, we served Korean food and traditional liquor prepared by the embassy. Actually, the occasion was an opportunity for the Korean embassy in the United States and Korean companies to meet U.S. governors and high-ranking officials in person to strengthen their network. We could reaffirm the close ties of the Chorus Alliance and the economic relations between the two countries. Also, Korean companies could actively promote Korea's advanced technology as well as cultural beauty. April 18th, 2020 is also a day I will never forget. It was the day when we conducted enduring friendship operation and got 500,000 test kits arrived in Maryland. About 70 years ago, 15,000 young Marylanders participated in the Korean War and 531 of them died. And on April 18th, Korea returned the favor and came to save Maryland's life with the test kits. When the pandemic began to hit the world in Maryland, what was as serious as the virus itself was the accusation and hatred against Asians. People would say, "Go back to China." Neglect and racism against Asians is actually nothing new, but the coronavirus outbreak has made it even worse. And also, after the tragic shooting incident in Atlanta, Georgia, fear and anger only increased. My husband and I formed a work group to combat the increase in anti-Asian prejudice and hate crimes. And we have suggested preventive measures and solutions and are making continuous efforts to prevent and eradicate Asian hate cultures. There is no compromise in the face of racism. We will never stop fighting. We will no longer be silent, but we will not respond with another form of violence or vengeance. Instead, we will love and care for each other and unite. So I said. As the First Lady, there are people whom I always thankful for and visit to express my gratitude and respect, and they are veterans of the Korean War. I always tell them like this: I would not be here today if it weren't for the dedication and sacrifice of the Korean War veterans who enabled democracy and freedom for my homeland. The memorial wall for Korean War veterans was erected in the Korean War Veterans Memorial Park at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. The wall teaches us the meaning of the war and stands as a symbol of strong Chorus Alliance. This is a monument that commemorates the noble sacrifices of the Korean War veterans. I go wherever Korean War veterans are and thank them. I also host events for Korean War veterans at the Maryland State Capitol building as well. We Koreans always work hard and diligently and thus have contributed to Korea's remarkable economic growth and development over the past 70 years since the Korean War. Wherever we live, us overseas Koreans should lead a good life, of course, but also contribute to our home country. The Overseas Koreans Foundation is implementing various projects for 7.5 million overseas Koreans and working to benefit both home country and the Korean community. The foundation is expanding educational and cultural exchanges to help establish Korean identity and enhance self-esteem. I think each and every one of us overseas Koreans, including myself, should lead by example. We should take pride in our home country and help more foreigners visit, learn, and understand Korea more. For a stronger Korea, we should lead in promoting proud Korean culture, including K-pop. Befitting the name Eastern Land of Courtesy, we should be polite, humble, and share with foreigners to let people know how friendly and warm-hearted Korea is. To help and cooperate with each other and to be better off together, we need to develop communities, share love, and embrace each other. I believe that each overseas Korean should become an evangelist of the Korean culture and serve as a diplomat in all corners of the world. As the first Korean First Lady in the American history, I will continue to fulfill my responsibilities as the daughter of Korea during my remaining term. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. As a private diplomat in the United States, Ms. Yumi Hogan is conducting so many public diplomacy activities. Please give her another warm round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for the insightful presentations delivered by all of our three speakers. With that, we would like to begin the discussion session. I'd like to invite our moderator, three speakers, and a discussant up to the stage. Once again, I would like to invite our moderator, speakers, and a discussant up to the stage for more conversation.
이번 세션에
To introduce our moderator, we have Secretary General Han Kyung-gu of Korean National Commission of UNESCO. The moderator worked as a professor in the College of Liberal Arts of Seoul National University and served as a member of the Presidential Commission for Sustainable Development, president of the Korean Society for the Study of Overseas Koreans, and he's working actively in the field of overseas Korean studies and global citizenship education. Over to you, Mr. Han. Thank you. Let me just begin today's discussion without further ado. First of all, I'd like to pass the microphone over to Ambassador Lee Sang-hwa, who has joined us as a discussant. Hello, I'm Ambassador Lee Sang-hwa for Public Diplomacy from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are joined by former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and the First Lady of the State of Maryland, Yumi Hogan, and many other distinguished guests and speakers. It is my great honor to be here. Listening to the three presentations, I came to think of this. I recently read this from a magazine. Actually, the head of the CNN Asia office is Korean, and I read a long interview of his. The interviewer asked, "What is the key behind your success?" And the person said,
but act like a Westerner, but feel like a Korean. 이렇게 대답한 게 가장 인상이 깊었어요.
and that was the answer given by the head of the CNN Korean office. So he thinks and acts as a global citizen, but he doesn't forget the pride that he has as a Korean, and he never forgets identity and the root he has as a Korean. And he has said that he is trying to strike a good balance between these two identities. That was my interpretation. Looking at former Secretary General Mr. Ban, I think that is exactly what Mr. Ban did as well, and I think that is another reason why he could succeed as a former Secretary General. In trying to solve so many international communities' problems, the Korean way of thinking and the Korean way of approaching to solutions with a harmonious perspective served as a nice reason why we could do a great job, I believe. And I can see that diverse public diplomacy activities are very active towards United States, and there is the Lifetime Japan supporter as well. And from this perspective, I think Lifetime Korean Supporter title should be given to Ms. Yumi Hogan. And also, Actor Park, I have to mention that I was very impressed by your presentation. I read the book of Pachinko. I think the most Korean is the most global now. That means the Korean cultural content is gaining more and more attention in the world, and I think pachinko is a case in point. I think this session is very timely and meaningful. At the end of August, under the Public Diplomacy Act, this 5-year action plan, the second 5-year action plan was prepared. And if you look at the action plan, one differentiator from the previous one is this. Over the last 5 years, we established the foundation of public diplomacy activities, and the government actually led the activities under our strategies. And going forward, we understand that the public diplomacy cannot lie solely in the hands of the government. Like President Kim mentioned, 7.5 million overseas Koreans should not be the target of the public diplomacy, but actually the agent or the active actor of the public diplomacy. That change in idea was the biggest difference from the previous action plan and the current one. In the 1st of September, we had a competition and received diplomacy policy suggestions from the public, and the best award was about archiving beautiful stories of overseas Koreans and make use of these beautiful stories as an ingredient for public diplomacy. And coincidentally, I believe that the idea was suggested by a student here in this Jeju University. Mr. Park talked about my grandmother's story in his presentation. It is such a touching story, right? So I think this is definitely one of the areas that we have to work better on. That is why last July, I talked with President Kim to strengthen our public diplomacy that involves overseas Koreans. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Overseas Koreans Foundation met in negotiation and consultation about this topic. And I definitely have to thank President Kim's leadership in making this session possible. In the first slide of Mr. Park's presentation, I could see a picture of bridge, and I really could relate to this. When I was in Myanmar, I had this episode. Back then, Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi talked about the system where the Myanmar workers were sent to Korea. When I was in charge of this policy, the Myanmar workers in Korea increased a lot in number. And back then, Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi said that all of those workers are not just workers, but goodwill ambassadors, who bring the minds of these two people closer and closer. By working harmoniously together in Korea, those people spread the value and the beauty of Myanmar and could get closer to Myanmar. So each and every one of them were the active agents of public diplomacy, according to Aung San Suu Kyi, and I cannot agree more. Under the Yoon Suk-yeol administration, global pivotal state is being promoted as a vision. And a lot of efforts are being made. And by next week, the President will be joining the General Assembly of the United Nations and deliver a keynote speech to announce more details about the global pivotal state vision. In this regard, I believe that in the public diplomacy sector as well, we have to realize these visions and come up with more ideas and thoughts as to how we can implement these visions and our ideas. President Kim mentioned the humanitarian ideal of 홍익인간. And I think this is in line with benefiting humankind or the Constitution of the United Nations. United Nations, marking its 77th anniversary, says that Korea achieved all the values that the United Nations is trying to promote in the shortest time ever, that are peace, development, and the human rights. So Korea is a very successful case in that regard, and I think we have to live up to this title. Many presenters have talked about the concept of identity. To realize the vision of global pivotal state from the public diplomacy sector, I think we have to make sure all the stakeholders from the public and private sector should be brought together, and we should not just talk, and we should act. And I think showing this process of action to all the people would be very important. The immigration or the diaspora history of Korea marks 120th anniversary if you think about it. The 7.5 million, this number in over 190 countries, the number itself is big, and I think what's bigger than that is Korea's newly acclaimed position in the global arena. Listening to the successful cases of overseas Koreans, President Kim said that all these successful overseas Koreans are doing a great job as a diplomat, and I cannot agree more. There are a lot of sensitive issues in the global arena, so rather than government taking the lead, I think overseas Koreans can take initiative. This convening power of the overseas Koreans is amazing, I believe. So I believe that the voluntary actions conducted by the overseas Koreans would be better accepted in the society of the world. The Overseas Koreans Foundation established a statue of the victims of the Japanese colonization of Korea, and the efforts to distribute vaccines can be cited as an example. We at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs believe that the best tool is the overseas residents. So in terms of public diplomacy, along with the overseas Koreans, we are making and actually listening to diverse ideas. Ms. Yumi Hogan mentioned the Kimchi Festival conducted jointly by the Overseas Koreans Foundation. When I was in Myanmar, I believe you all know that the Kimjang culture made it to the list of the UNESCO heritage. And just like Ms. Yumi Hogan said, we share our love by sharing food. And in Myanmar, we shared Korea's traditional dish of kimchi and Myanmar's traditional food of mohinga together in one occasion. And I think that is another example of what we can do. One last point of mine would be this. Be it the United States, China, European countries, or wherever that may be, I think it is important for the overseas Koreans to harmonize with the host society you are in, and be a proud Korean. Respect, when in Rome, you have to abide by the rule of Rome. So respect the host community and also make sure that you do not lose the Korean identity. That would be my last point. Thank you very much.
대사님, 정말
Yes, thank you very much. Ambassador Lee is leading public diplomacy here in Korea, and he has given us very excellent remarks about the role of overseas Koreans in public diplomacy. I believe was well emphasized by Ambassador Lee. And the former Secretary General Pan has joined us. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause for His Excellency, former Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. And we also have Honorable Governor of Maryland, Mr. Hogan, with us. So, His Excellency, let's give His Excellency a round of applause too. And The theme of this session is the role of overseas Koreans in public diplomacy, and Mr. Kim Song-gon, the president, talked about beautiful Korean in his presentation. You've just heard Ambassador Lee Sang-hwa, and you've also listened to the talk given by Honorable First Lady of Maryland and actor Park So-hee. And so let's ask if Mr. Kim has anything to add. As was just mentioned by Ambassador Lee, well, public diplomacy is more than words. Public diplomacy has to be implemented through various programs on the field, that is on the spot. And it's very important that overseas Koreans serve as a bridge. And I think what's really important is the attitude. I talked about 홍익 인간, which is a founding concept of Korea, which means to benefit the whole humanity. I think what's really important is that no matter where I live, I should love humanity, the spirit of loving humanity. I think that should be the most important way of thinking, and that is, what 홍익 인간 is all about. So for us to have peace on the Korean Peninsula and to have peace in the world, I think we should love other people the way I would love myself. And I think that is the basics of public diplomacy.
Thank you. Looking at the presentation files of Mr. Park, I wondered what the story is going to be about, but listening to the presentation, I was deeply touched and moved. In the field of public diplomacy, there are some elements that should be regarded important. And about this question, I think Mr. Park gave the answer through his presentation. The pachinko where Mr. Park featured, talks about the Korean people living in the United States and Japan and their stories. There is the city of Bucheon between Seoul and Incheon, and the city is the UNESCO designated city of culture and literature. And this UNESCO Literature Award was created, and this November, Pachinko became the awardee of this award. So looking at Mr. Park, I was very moved and touched. With that, can I ask you to provide a short comment?
I talked about the racism and discrimination in Japan, but now I feel like it's our problem. Inside us, we are still afraid. We are making a much bigger thing inside of us. So now I think the dice in our hand, finally, it's our turn. So not only being afraid, I think we have to speak up finally. But the thing is, we don't have like role models like Ms. Hogan, the First Lady of Maryland. We don't have it. Our 선배님들 are too afraid. They're successful. So why are they still afraid? I don't want to be like that. For the future generations, 차세대를 위해, I want to be the bridge. I want to be the one who keeps speaking up. Yeah.
네, 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you.
예,
Thank you. Listening to Ms. Yumi Hogan's presentation as well, the First Lady mentioned the kimchi, hanbok, and the Korean food. I do want to visit Ms. Yumi's channel, Yumi Cook, right? The name of the channel. Maybe add one M and make it Yummy Cook. And you ended with the talks regarding the racial discrimination, the human rights, and the COVID-19 triggered feeling that the entire world is one and the international cooperations need and so on and so forth. And about your presentation, can you give us a little bit more comment? Thank you. It is not just me, actually. There are a lot of people who are serving as patriots in so many corners of the world. I have lived more in the United States than in Korea, actually, if you think about it. I have 1 grandson and 4 granddaughters. I myself am a grandmother. But the ball shouldn't stop at my generation, nor my daughter's generation. For my grandsons and granddaughters' generation, we have to do something, because if we don't, the future is going to become more and more difficult. Wherever you are, be it France, be it United States, and wherever you are, make sure you become a beautiful flower with a beautiful scent. As a Korean American, I hope that you can contribute your community. My generation worked so hard for my sons and daughters' generation, and by now we can say that we somehow settled in the community that we are living right now. So for the sake of the community, wherever you are, regardless of the gender and your race, I hope we can unite and serve our neighbors, not just for our family, not just for me, but for the entire community. You go out and you volunteer and you show the neighborhood and community that we love you. And I think practicing this sense of volunteerism and the volunteer activity is very important. Just like President Kim and the moderator said, the times have changed actually. When I was growing up, we just said yes to our parents, right? We didn't reject the idea of the parents. We couldn't talk back, but things are not like that these days. So to our daughters and sons, we have to share our thoughts and express ourselves that we love you and that we love our sons and daughters. And I believe just like we express our love to our daughters and sons, we have to express our love to our community. I hope that you all can become a beautiful flower with a beautiful scent wherever you are. Thank you.
오늘 이제 김성권
And President Kim Song-gon has talked about beautiful Koreans. And as I was listening to President Kim Song-gon, I was reminded of Baekbom Kim-gu. He has written about his wish. And his wish was to make Korea a beautiful country. And he wanted Korea to be beautiful. And if we had a bit of time, it would have been really nice, to talk about the difference and the similarities between President Kim Song-gon's beautiful Korea and Baekbom Kim-gu's beautiful Korea. Well, President Kim Song-gon just said that's the same thing. And Baekbom Kim-gu has said that he wanted world peace achieved thanks to Korea. So he wanted Korea to play a role in creating world peace. And that's what he said. And actor Park So-hee talked about his life as a Korean in Japan. And there are things, there are roles that can be played in terms of protecting human rights, in terms of a sustainable development. And Honorable Yumi Hogan not only does work-related food and the promotion of Korea, but she is also involved in protecting human rights, talking about human rights. So public diplomacy is not just seeking short-term national interests. And it should be pursued in a broader concept. So that public diplomacy should be something that help Korea to be a country that can promote world peace, that can contribute to a better world. I want to thank President Kim Song-gon, and I want to thank Honorable First Lady Yumi Ho-gun, as well as actor Sohee Park and Ambassador Sang-hwa Lee for their talk and presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was indeed a very meaningful occasion where we could entertain ourselves with so many meaningful stories. And here we'd like to give out the plaque of appreciation. President Kim Song-gon of Overseas Koreans Foundation would like to give the plaque of appreciation to the First Lady of the State of Maryland, Ms. Yumi Ho-gun. If the plaque is ready, dear Yumi Ho-gun, you as a Korean American have contributed to the communities of Korea and the United States and have contributed to the advancement of the relations between the two, representing the global overseas Koreans. I give you this plaque and may God bless you and your family. Please give another big round of applause. As a Korean private diplomat living in the United States, Ms. Yumi Ho-gun is making great activities. Please give a big hand. And we would like to take a commemorative photo. Please look in the camera. Thank you. And along with the moderator and the speakers and the discussant, we would like to take a photo. Please look into the camera in front of you and give us a big smile. The Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity 2022 being held under the theme of the Beyond Conflict Towards Peace, Coexistence and Cooperation. The session of Overseas Koreans Foundation is now nearing to an end, and we like to take a commemorative photo inviting our VIPs up to the stage as well. Please look into the camera and give us a big smile. I hope that the public diplomacy encompassing 7.5 million overseas Koreans can contribute to the peace and the harmony on the Korean Peninsula and beyond. Hoping that day would come. Please let us wrap up with another big round of applause. Thank you. With that, I'd like to conclude the Global Korean Public Diplomacy for Peace and Coexistence session. Thank you for staying with us till the end.